Here am I, on behalf of Valour Canada, crossing the River Rhine at Arnhem. Arnhem is just down behind me over there, and what we've got then is, I can see the railway bridge beyond it, John Frost Bridge. That was the objective of the 17th of September 1944, First Airborne's attempt to get across the Rhine and get into the Reich before the Russians can get there. We know it's a failure. What we perhaps don't know is the role that the Canadians take in the operation. The battle will go on with the airborne being pushed back into the Oosterbeek perimeter, which is on this bank of the River Rhine, the northern bank, and the decision is taken following the failure to get Polish soldiers across the river to help them, actually to evacuate. That's discussed on the 21st and agreed, and it begins with the idea of collapsing back. The soldiers inside the perimeter will fall back towards the River Rhine and then cross it. How do they cross it? 4 companies of Royal Engineers using storm boats. The key ones are both Canadians. The 20th and 23rd Canadian field companies using storm boats will cross under the guns on that hill there. That is exactly where the Germans were. Luckily, on the night, foul weather, pitch black, pouring with rain. About 150 trips are made by the 2 Canadian field companies, bringing out over 2,500 British soldiers from the perimeter. Of the over 10,000 that have got in, less than 3,000 get out. Most of the 2,500 who come out in reasonable order come out because of the 20th Company and the 23rd Company of Canadian engineers. The losses are high. 7 dead in the company, 14 wounded, 5 awards for gallantry. And we can only imagine, with our lovely calm crossing on this summer's day, what it must have been like under the guns of the Nazis on the hill there. Constant fire. The evacuation only stops at dawn, because at that point it's all over. By the morning of the 26th, Operation Market Garden is over. It has been, frankly, a complete disaster. But modern German historians have said it was the worst victory of the Second World War, because it ensured that it wasn't the Allies that get to Berlin, it's the Russians. I'm now stood on the south bank of the River Rhine, basically on the edge of the Oosterbeek perimeter, which is on the northern bank. And I had the opportunity to interview one of the glider pilots who was here. The glider pilots flew in the guys on the 17th of September and subsequently, and then they acted as infantry. But when they began the collapsing back, the movement back to the River Rhine to get as many men out as possible, they acted as the guides. They guided people out. And Captain Aston said that he and a group of his fellow glider pilots managed to get across the Rhine. I can't remember whether they came by stormboat or whether they swam. Some of them did. I think he probably came by boat because he was in fairly good order. And he was a senior man. And when they got here, there were people wearing uniforms with no trousers, there were people without boots, there were things. And waiting somewhere here were some soldiers of the 49th Wessex Division who said, "Sir, if you go down there and over the bank, you can get a cup of tea and a sandwich. You know, you'll need that." And they started to walk down towards safety. And as they did so, the sergeant came back in front of Captain Aston and said, "Sir, this looks like a retreat from Moscow." "I don't understand," he said. He was very tired. He went, "I should fall the men in." "Oh yes," he said, "fall the men in." They fell in threes and they marched. Even without boots, they marched. And they marched down the track over, and over the other side of there were members of the Army Catering Corps. And sure enough, they had tea and they had coffee and they had bacon sandwiches and they had buns. But the point was that when they got there, they stopped. The sergeant said, "Sir, permission to fall the men out." "Yes, of course, carry on, Sergeant." The words were then, "Officer on parade, dismiss." The men turned smartly to their right and they went to get their sandwiches. And Captain Aston said, the point was, we were no longer defeated. It was just a reverse.